I disappeared after my parents attempted to trick me into working as an unpaid living nanny for my sister, but their sense of control was destroyed by what transpired next. I'm just a typical 25-year-old who put in a lot of effort to finish college and get my first teaching position in an elementary school. I enjoy working with children, so even though it's not a high-paying job, it's worth it. However, finances are tight, particularly in the beginning. I've been living with my parents in the same suburban home where I grew up because of this. It's a useful setup, but it's not the most thrilling. I buy my own groceries, and they charge me a fair rent, as my dad likes to say. Additionally, when Dad hurt his back last summer, I helped out with chores like mowing the lawn, fixing things around the house, and even cleaning out the garage. It's transient, but it's not glamorous. I intended to remain for a few years, save some cash, and then look for a place of my own. Easy, isn't it? It was easy until my older sister Amanda came back into the picture. Amanda is 32 years old. And how should I phrase this politely? She hasn't always been the responsible kind. She was the golden child growing up. She could do no wrong in our parents' eyes, though I'm not sure if that was because she was the firstborn or if they simply had a soft spot for her. She left college early, twice actually. She didn't feel inspired the first time, which is why. She claimed that the professors were too demanding the second time. She has never worked for more than a few months at a job. Whenever something didn't work out for her, she would give up and make an excuse about how it wasn't her fault. She consistently received late rent payments from our parents. They would cover the cost. The car broke down. They would pay for the fix. Got a ticket for speeding. Mom would mutter about how the police target young women as she wrote the check. In the meantime, I was taking out loans to pay for my tuition and cleaning restrooms at a diner to save money for college. I assumed that Amanda had been living alone for the previous 2 years. It turned out that she had been living in different apartments all the time, falling behind on her rent and relying on her parents to help her stay afloat. Before she showed up one day and casually mentioned that she was pregnant, I was unaware of any of this. Let's just say Amanda wasn't exactly in a stable situation, but I'm not here to judge people for their life decisions. According to what I could tell the baby's father, a man she had been dating for a few months wasn't overly excited about the whole surprise baby situation. When she told him, he essentially disappeared. This should serve as Amanda's wake-up call, wouldn't it? As if she had finally realized she needed to organize her life at this point. However, no. Rather, she ran directly to her parents, who instantly went into fix mode. They had begun transforming the basement into a small flat for her within a week. They installed a kitchenette as well. Mom mentioned drawing from their retirement funds, but I didn't inquire about the source of the funds. Since it wasn't really my business, I made an effort to avoid getting involved. They had the option to throw money at Amanda if they so desired. However, I was already able to see the writing on the wall. My parents have a tendency to involve everyone else in Amanda's issues. They seem to believe that regardless of how much of a mess she has caused, we must all work together to support her. I initially assured myself that it wouldn't have an impact on me. In order to give Amanda a private space, the basement was being converted into her tiny flat. I assumed she would move in, take care of herself, and I would move on. Yes, I tried not to think about it, but it was a little annoying to see them go out of their way for her once more. For roughly 2 months, that way of thinking was effective. Then minor issues began to accumulate. Mom first started saying that since Amanda was going through so much, I should spend more time with her. I didn't care that I was working full-time and was usually exhausted when I got home. Subtle guilt trips followed. "You know, Amanda doesn't have anyone else to lean on right now," Mom would say. "Being pregnant and unmarried is really difficult." As if I were supposed to magically solve all of Amanda's problems, she would say this while staring at me. Dad wasn't any more favorable. Every conversation he had, he would find a way to include Amanda. He would pass the salt at dinner and say, "Abby, you should be thankful for everything you have. You're not as fortunate as everyone else." Fortunate, I was struggling to save money and establish a career. Amanda, meanwhile, was receiving a completely remodeled flat, as well as unending financial and emotional support. However, one night I overheard my parents talking, and it took things to a new level. I was in the kitchen brewing tea while they were in the living room. Mom said she would require a lot of assistance after the baby was born. Dad said, "Of course we'll all help out." Everything Mom inquired. "Well, Abby, you and me." As if it were clear, Dad said. I almost let my mug fall. Although they hadn't discussed this plan with me, it was obvious that they had already decided I would be involved. That's when I became uncomfortable. I could tell they were planning something that would drag me into Amanda's chaos, whether I liked it or not, even though I didn't know the specifics yet. When Amanda began to visit more frequently, the uneasiness only intensified. She would collapse on the couch and gripe about how difficult pregnancy was and how unjust her exit veiled was. She would remark in passing how fortunate I was to have a reliable job and no children to worry about. I kept thinking, why does this always fall on me? But I bit my tongue every time because I didn't want to start a fight. When dinner time finally arrived that evening, I had a dreadful feeling that something was about to happen. I knew it wasn't going to be good, but I wasn't sure what it was. I had the unshakable feeling that something was going to happen when we all sat down to dinner. You know when everyone is acting a little too casually as if everyone but you is aware of a secret? It felt like that. Amanda was merely scrolling through her phone while Mom and Dad were discussing unrelated topics, including the neighbor's new fence. They seemed to be waiting for the perfect opportunity to surprise me, and it felt forced. Spaghetti. My dad's favorite food was for dinner. We must have a meal together as a family. I have no idea why. It's not as if eating spaghetti makes it easier to accept bad news. I made an effort to keep my attention on my plate and avoid making too many assumptions. However, Mom cleared her throat around the middle of the meal. "Thus, we have been considering." She began to look at her father. I went cold. Those words never produced anything positive. Mom went on in an unduly sweet voice. "Amanda is going to need some help now that she's moving back home. What specifically do you need help with?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Before she could respond with the baby, of course, Dad jumped in. "It will be difficult for Amanda to handle everything by herself because she has a lot on her plate right now." I turned to look at Amanda, who continued to browse through her phone as if this conversation had no relevance to her. She didn't even raise her head. "All right, but how is that related to me?" I put down my fork and asked. My parents looked at each other as if they were attempting to think of the right way to phrase whatever it was they were going to say. Mom started by saying, "You already live here and are an excellent teacher, so you're very good with kids. We decided that you should assist with babysitting." Assistance. I raised an eyebrow and repeated. Dad gave a hearty nod. "Yes, just watch the baby while Amanda recovers, you know. It would not be a full-time position. Only while you're at home." What I was hearing was unbelievable. "Do you want me to work a full-time job and watch a newborn?" Mom said, "Well, you're home by 3 most days." Dad added, as if it were somehow relevant, "And you're not paying market rent." I gazed at them, attempting to comprehend their question. They weren't merely requesting assistance. They were expecting me to work for free at a second job. I leaned back in my chair and said, "Wait, let me clear this up. You want me to look after Amanda's baby after I get home from teaching all day Mom's side?" As if I was intentionally being challenging, "Abby, it's not like that. All of us will contribute." I said it again. "We're all family," Dad said. "Family members also support one another." Amanda eventually raised her head from her phone at that moment. She grinned and said, "Wow, Abby. I had no idea that helping your sister meant so much to you." Beneath the table, I felt my hands clench into fists. Her voice sounded so entitled that I didn't want to lose my temper. "That's not the point," I said. "I work for myself and have my own life. I can't simply leave everything to watch the kids." "You're being self-centered," Mom said in a stern voice. "Amanda is currently going through a very difficult period. Helping her is the least you can do. Why am I supposed to correct her decisions?" Despite my best efforts to remain composed, I shot back, raising my voice. "Her age is 32. She is no longer a child. I got it from Amanda." "Do you mean me?" Take a look. That's sufficient, Dad said in a firm voice. Whether you like it or not, we're all in this together. We expect you to contribute since you live with us. Family, I said. I buy my own groceries and pay my rent. I assist with household tasks. How is that insufficient? There was a brief silence in the room, and I could sense the tension lingering. Amanda appeared smug as she sat there as if she had already won. Mom finally said, "Maybe we should reconsider your living arrangement if you're not willing to help." I felt sick to my stomach. "Are you saying you'll throw me out?" "Obviously not," Mom said hastily. "However, we might need to talk about raising your rent if you're unwilling to make a larger contribution." What I was hearing was unbelievable. If you can call it that, I had been doing everything in my power to be a good tenant. They were now attempting to use guilt to force me to accept obligations that weren't mine. "Are you really going to do this?" My voice trembled as I asked. "Are you going to discipline me for declining Amanda's offer of a free nanny?" Dad said, "It's not punishment. It has to do with belonging to the family." Getting up from the table, I said, "It's about the two of you supporting Amanda as usual. You're attempting to include me in it now." Mom yelled, "Don't talk about your sister like that." I turned to face the stairs and said, "I'm done. Do you wish to assist Amanda? Okay, but don't involve me." With my heart thumping in my chest, I rushed upstairs and slammed the door to my room. I was shocked by what had just transpired. Although I had always known that my parents preferred Amanda, this was completely different. It seemed to have to do with control. In order to control me into doing whatever they wanted to keep me living with them. What truly stuck out to me was how arrogant Amanda appeared throughout the entire exchange. She hardly spoke at all. As if nothing were wrong, she sat there and scrolled through her phone. And I suppose it wasn't in her mind. Her parents were already going above and beyond to make accommodations for her, and now they were attempting to include me as well. That night, I don't believe I slept for more than a few hours. I kept reliving the conversation in my mind every time I closed my eyes, remembering all the things I ought to have said, but didn't. I was still upset when my alarm went off the following morning, but I felt stuck most of the time. I couldn't simply get up and go. Packing up my belongings and finding my own place was something I had considered, but it wasn't that easy. For the next few days, I couldn't live alone on my salary because I had only been teaching for a few months and was still trying to save up rent in the area, which was crazy. The atmosphere in the house was tense. Mom and Dad were obviously upset with me, but they began with the passive-aggressive remarks rather than discussing it. One evening, as I entered the house, my mother remarked, "It must be nice to have so much free time after work." Without even looking up from his newspaper, Dad continued, "Yeah, some people don't have that luxury." Disregarding them, I headed directly to my room. I had no desire to argue at this time. I didn't have the energy for it, and I knew that anything I said would only make things worse. Meanwhile, Amanda was having the time of her life. Even though she hadn't moved in yet, she was at the house practically every day, occupying the living room with her belongings and behaving as though she already owned it. As if it were no big deal, she would leave her purse on the dining table, her shoes by the couch, and a few shopping bags strewn about. She was watching a reality show while enjoying a bowl of ice cream on the couch one evening when I got home. When I walked in, she didn't even acknowledge me. She gave me a half-hearted hello, looked up, and returned to her show. For a moment, I waited for her to say something else. Perhaps an apology or simply a thank you for not losing your cool over the situation, but nothing. I discovered that half of my groceries were gone when I went to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. I bought bread, but it's gone. The yogurt is gone. Not even my leftovers from the previous evening were there. Have you consumed my food? Returning to the living room, I asked. Amanda didn't even raise her head. I could, Mom murmured in between ice cream bites. I yelled, "It wasn't her who paid for it." At last, Amanda rolled her eyes and looked at me. "Chill out, Abby. It's just food. It's my food," I said, my voice rising. "If you want groceries, go buy your own." "Geez, you don't have to be such a drama queen," Amanda said, setting her bowl down on the coffee table. "You're acting like I stole your car or something." I didn't even know what to say. I just stood there fuming while Amanda grabbed her phone and started texting someone, completely ignoring me again. I wanted to yell, to tell her how entitled and selfish she was being, but I knew it wouldn't make a difference. Amanda had spent her entire life getting away with this kind of behavior because Mom and Dad let her. And now they were trying to make me part of the problem. The next morning, Mom cornered me in the kitchen while I was making coffee. "You need to apologize to your sister," she said, her tone stern. "For what?" I asked, genuinely baffled. "For making her feel unwelcome," Mom said, crossing her arms. "She's going through so much right now, and the last thing she needs is you being difficult." "Are you serious?" I said, turning to face her. She ate all my food and acted like it was no big deal. "How is that my fault?" Mom sighed, like I was the one being unreasonable. "It's just food, Abby. You can always buy more." "That's not the point." I spoke, attempting to maintain a steady tone. "The point is that she doesn't respect anyone's boundaries, and you're letting her get away with it." "Boundaries," Mom said, practically scoffing. "This is her home now, too. You need to learn how to share." At that moment, I realized there was no reasoning with her. Mom wasn't interested in hearing my side of things. She just wanted me to fall in line and do what was best for the family. Over the next week, things got worse. Mom and Dad started dropping hints that they were going to raise my rent if I didn't step up. Amanda began moving more of her stuff into the house, filling the basement with furniture and boxes. She even started using my bathroom because apparently the one downstairs wasn't good enough. I tried to keep my distance, but it felt like no matter what I did, they were all determined to drag me into their chaos. One night, I came home to find Dad in the living room, holding what looked like a budget spreadsheet. "We need to talk," he said, gesturing for me to sit down. I hesitated, but eventually sat on the edge of the couch, bracing myself for whatever was coming next. "We've been looking at the numbers," Dad said, tapping the paper with his pen and with Amanda moving in. "Costs are increasing. We believe that you should contribute more." I said, "You're already charging me rent. How much more are you looking for?" Dad gave a shrug. "That's still a mystery to us. This appears to be the best option, though, if you're unwilling to assist with the baby." What I was hearing was unbelievable. They were actually attempting to coerce me into babysitting by using my rent as leverage. "This is absurd," I said, getting to my feet. "For what I receive here, I already pay more than enough. Just let me know if you want me to go. You're not being asked to leave." Dad spoke hastily. "All we ask is that you do your share." "My part," I said again. "You mean the part about Amanda?" To answer, Dad opened his mouth. However, I denied him the opportunity. I slammed the door behind me as I left the room and headed straight for my bedroom. I realized then that I couldn't continue in this manner. I couldn't continue to live with my parents treating me like free labor and disregarding my boundaries. I was unsure of how or when, but I was certain of one thing. I needed to leave. I kept thinking that, and each time it got louder. Mom and Dad tried to guilt trip me into helping, or Amanda walked around the house like she owned it. But leaving and actually doing it were two very different things. I still had very little saved. Not enough to live comfortably in my own home, and the thought of abruptly leaving my life behind was too much to bear. I knew, though, that I couldn't stay. It would never end if I allowed them to pressure me into becoming Amanda's substitute parent right now. They simply kept adding things to me until I got stuck. One day, I didn't want to wake up, resentful and miserable 5 years later, still residing in that house. I sat down with my laptop and brewed myself a cup of coffee the following morning. I launched a spreadsheet to monitor my student loan balance, groceries, rent, and petrol. Despite my poor saving skills, I had been setting aside a small amount each month. After calculating everything, I concluded that if I could find a place that was affordable and temporarily reduce my extravagance, I could manage a move. There was no better time to do it. A few weeks ago, Ellie, one of my co-workers, mentioned that she was trying to find a flatmate. At the time, I hadn't given it much thought, but now it felt vital. "Hey, is that flatmate thing still an option?" I texted her. She answered almost instantly. "Yes, I'm still searching." "Why are you intrigued?" "Yes, perhaps. After work, is it possible for us to speak naturally? Ellie's answer was succinct and direct. I arrived at school late that afternoon and waited until the hallways were empty before going to Ellie's class. She was grading papers while seated at her desk. What is going on? Glancing up from her pile of essays, she asked, uncertain of how much to reveal. I paused for a moment. At last, I mentioned that I was considering leaving my parents' house. They're complicating matters. Ellie gave a nod, as if she understood without my explanation. The offers are still available, she stated. Although it's not very large, it's clean, and we would divide everything equally. The monthly rent is $800. Included are utilities. Although it was a bit more than I had hoped for, it was manageable. When is the best time for someone to move in? I inquired. She made a joke about yesterday before adding, but really, the room is yours whenever you're in. Although I had already made up my mind, I told her that I would inform her by the end of the week. This was how I got out. After that, I had to figure out how to get out of there without making things even more dramatic. I knew my parents would try to thwart my plan if they learnt about it too soon. To prevent me from saving anything, they would accuse me, argue with me, and possibly even raise my rent right away. So I said nothing. I began packing. Gradually, concentrating on clothing, personal belongings, necessities, and anything I couldn't afford to replace. I kept everything in my car's trunk and covered it with a blanket in case someone was interested. I began recording everything at the same time just in case. I photographed my room, my electronics, my furniture, and anything else that might later cause conflict. I was aware that Amanda had a tendency to lose track of who owned what, and I didn't want to lose my belongings. One night, when everyone was asleep in the midst of the chaos of leaving, I formally gave my 30-day notice in a letter that I printed out. Although I wasn't legally a tenant, I had done some research online and discovered that it was still a good idea to have everything in writing. They accusing me of abruptly leaving was the last thing I wanted. That night, I didn't get much sleep because I was always looking at the time and listening for any sounds that would indicate someone was awake. I eventually slipped the envelope beneath my parents' bedroom door at 6 a.m. The response came instantly. Mom and Dad were waiting for me in the living room when I arrived home from work that day. What is this holding up the letter as if it were a personal jab? Dad asked. I said in a steady voice, it's my notice. This is what you're actually doing. With a shaky voice already, Mom asked. Yes, I said firmly. I'll be leaving by the end of the month after finding a place. You can't simply walk away. Mom said, how about Amanda? How is the infant doing? I inhaled deeply while attempting to maintain my composure. I'm not accountable for Amanda or the baby. I've tried my hardest to help out here, but I can't continue to live this way. What's wrong with you? Dad said, raising his voice. Before you weren't this obstinate. We've helped you get off the ground and allowed you to live here among other things, and you pay us back like this. My fists clenched as I suppressed the urge to scream. I gritted my teeth and said, I pay rent, I purchase my own food. Since the day I graduated, I have taken responsibility for my own actions. I am no longer a child. Additionally, I'm not your fallback option for Amanda. So I wasn't surprised when Mom started crying. When things didn't go her way, she would always cry. How are you able to harm us? She cried. To your sister. I remained silent. I was aware that there was no use. I wasn't going to change my mind, and they weren't going to listen. Some of the most uncomfortable days of my life ensued. I didn't hear much from my parents other than the occasional guilt trip. Amanda pretended that nothing had altered, occupying the house as though it were already hers. She had moved more of her belongings into the basement, packing clothes into the closet, and stacking boxes on top of the couch when I got home one evening. She seemed to be claiming every available inch of space as if she were demarcating her territory. When I entered, she said, I hope you don't mind. I didn't answer. Ignoring the knot of rage that was forming in my chest, I simply went upstairs and shut the door to my room. I stepped up my preparations in the last few days before my move. I made plans with Ellie to pick up the keys, packed the last of my necessities, and double-checked my budget. Even though everything was coming together, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling of unease. The morning I formally moved out was the most difficult. We were going to load up the last of my belongings before going to Ellie's flat, so I had made arrangements for her to stop by with her car. Mom and Dad would be too preoccupied with their morning rituals to bother me, and Amanda would still be asleep, so I figured I timed it just right. Nothing in my family ever goes that smoothly, of course. My dad's slippers shuffling down the hallway was a familiar sound to me as I was halfway through carrying boxes out to my car. At the top of the stairs, he emerged. "What are you doing?" He made a demand. I continued to move. "I'm leaving today, as I mentioned," I said as I picked up another box and made my way to the door. "This isn't how you sneak out." He followed me outside and snapped. "Abby, we're a family. Are you leaving your family behind?" I turned to him after placing the box in my car's trunk. I tried to sound calm as I said, "I'm not leaving anyone behind. I'm making the decision to live my own life. There is a distinction." Dad appeared to be trying to argue. However, his mother showed up in the doorway with her arms folded and tears running down her cheeks before he could speak. "This is what you're actually doing." Her voice trembled as she asked. "Indeed," I said, refusing to back down. "How about Amanda?" she cried. "How is the infant doing?" I let out a sigh as the conversation's weight became too much to bear. "I've told you before, Mom. I don't care about Amanda or the baby. I can't keep giving up my life to correct the mistakes that triggered her. You have no right to discuss your sister in such a way." Her voice rose as she sobbed. "She's trying her hardest." "Is she?" It appears from my vantage point that she is simply waiting for everyone else to do the work for her, so I shot back. Just then, Amanda came out of the basement looking unkempt but alert. She smirked after taking one look at what was happening in the driveway. With a sarcastic tone, she said, "Don't worry, Mom. Allow Abby to be selfish if she so chooses. In any case, we don't need her." I refrained from retaliating by clenching my fists. Ellie had just pulled up in her car, so I turned to her instead. I ignored the confusion behind me and said, "Let's get this done." After giving me a pitying glance, Ellie began assisting me with packing the remainder of my belongings into the cars. My parents kept arguing in the background, bringing up every possible excuse for guilt they could. "Now who will assist us?" "How can you be so heartless?" Dad yelled. Mom cried. Leaning against the doorframe, Amanda watched the entire event as if it were a live performance for her amusement. I felt as though I had completed a marathon by the time we had finished loading everything. I took a final look at the house I had lived in for so long as I stood in the driveway. I was only relieved, even though it should have been a bittersweet moment. Ellie followed closely behind me as I turned on the engine and drove off. When I pulled into Ellie's apartment complex, I instantly felt relieved. It wasn't ostentatious, but it was tidy, peaceful, and above all, dramatic. After Ellie helped me move everything inside, I was unpacked and in my new room in an hour. After that, we talked about work while sitting on the couch. It felt natural, like a return to the life I had been missing while enmeshed in the turmoil of my family. However, that piece was only around 2 hours long. My phone began to buzz constantly. Voicemails, texts, and calls. My parents, aunts, and cousins were involved. It seems that everyone had something to say about my mom spreading the word that I had left the family. "Abby, how could you harm your sister in this way?" My Aunt Carol left me a voicemail. "She is vulnerable and pregnant. Do you not value family? You're not even close to being selfish." A cousin sent me another text. Amanda's posts on social media were the worst. She had gone into full victim mode, sharing photos of her growing baby bump along with comments that suggested some people would prefer to flee rather than support their own family. At least my child will understand what true love looks like. I blocked her right away. Even though it was annoying, I resisted the urge to return. I reminded myself that I had left for precisely this reason, to avoid the drama and manipulation that came with being a member of my family. Things at work became even more bizarre the following week. During my lunch break, my mother arrived at the school, sobbing and pleading with me to speak. She was having a complete breakdown, ranting about how I had ruined the family and how Amanda was disintegrating without me. It was embarrassing that my principal had to intervene and ask her to leave. Knowing that everyone was probably wondering what kind of family drama I was involved in, I avoided making eye contact with them for the remainder of the day. However, that experience really worked to my advantage. Of course, life isn't that easy, but I thought I was done with the house and all the chaos it brought. 2 weeks or so later, I discovered that I had forgotten some crucial paperwork, including tax returns, my teaching certification, and other documents I required for my job. I usually kept those items in a small drawer, but I hadn't checked it twice because I was so focused on leaving the house. I therefore told a few of my coworkers about everything that had been going on when my mother showed up at my school. Without hesitation, they volunteered to assist. "Tell us when you're prepared to pick up the remaining items." As she gave me her extra car keys, Ellie spoke. "We'll get there quickly." Ellie and Maria, a colleague, accompanied me to my parents' house a few days later to gather the remaining items I had. I underestimated how low they were willing to go, but I thought I was prepared for whatever nonsense they might try to pull. By the time we arrived at my room, it had completely changed. There was a territorial takeover of sorts as Amanda had moved more of her belongings and mixed them with mine. I had clothes stuffed into my dresser that weren't mine. My nightstand had been completely cleared out and restocked with her belongings, and my desk was covered in random baby items. "What's happening?" "More to myself than to anyone else," I muttered. Amanda showed up in the doorway with a cup of coffee and a completely unconcerned expression. "Oh, hey," she said nonchalantly, as though nothing had occurred. "My belongings must have gotten mixed up. Right now, it's difficult to tell what is mine and what is yours." I gazed at her, attempting to comprehend the boldness of her statement. "Do you mean the items that have been in my room for years?" She took a sip of her coffee and shrugged. "You've already gone, though. What does it matter then?" She had obviously done this intentionally to make things harder for me. She was unaware, however, that I had foreseen this very situation. I took out my phone and accessed the folder containing the photos I had taken of my room prior to her moving in. I made a list of everything I owned, including the serial numbers of my electronics, and I already have pictures of everything I said while she was looking at the screen. Amanda's expression twisted in exasperation, but her parents arrived before she could reply. "What's happening?" Dad insisted. "How come you're in here?" Angrily, he asked. "Amanda says she can't tell what's mine and what's hers. But I came to get some stuff I forgot," I said, trying to sound as composed as I could. "However, I have records for everything I own." Dad's face grew serious. "I'll call the police if you take anything that isn't yours." I laughed a little without humor. "Go ahead," I said. "We can also discuss with them whether it is lawful for you to enter my room without permission and to tamper with my possessions." He stopped talking after that. Maria and Ellie took over and assisted me in cleaning up the mess. When I picked up my laptop, Amanda attempted to argue that it was hers, but I only needed to show the purchase receipt and a picture of the serial number. Her anger increased as she became more aware that her plan would fail. She threw her hands in the air and yelled, "This is so unfair! Are you robbing a pregnant woman?" I finally got tired and turned to her. "You are the only one attempting to steal anything here," I spoke firmly. "Similar to how you've been attempting to take away my freedom and time by expecting me to serve as your unpaid nanny. No longer." I didn't turn around after getting into Ellie's car, but that was all 6 months ago. The baby was born to Amanda, and everything is collapsing just like I said it would. In addition to their full-time jobs, my parents are now forced to provide the child care they attempted to force upon me. The few family members who still talk to me say they're tired and overwhelmed. Amanda hasn't even looked for work. She says she's too stressed to work, which is probably true given how much time she spends ignoring her obligations and scrolling through her phone. With a crying baby and an unfinished basement renovation that is depleting their retirement funds, she is still residing in my parents' home. They've reportedly tried to get in touch with me multiple times since I left. Initially, I received irate texts criticizing my lack of gratitude. They went on guilt trips about how much the baby needed me after that failed, sending pictures of my niece with comments like, "Don't you want to meet your only niece?" is the newest tactic. And she requires the presence of her aunt. I've put up email filters to block their messages and blocked them all on social media. I've been kept informed by a few family members who are sympathetic to my situation, but I've made it plain that I have no interest in mending relationships until my parents and Amanda own up to their wrongdoing and take significant action. Ironically, I probably would have agreed if they had simply respected my boundaries and, like regular people, asked for occasional babysitting assistance. I would have been happy to help out occasionally because I love children, but their attempt to force me into full-time childcare while ignoring my autonomy and personal space ruined any chance of that. That's my story then. All of this chaos made me realize that sometimes the best thing you can do for your family is to stop supporting their harmful habits, even if it means leaving them. Story 2. After using my uncle's money to take a lavish vacation, my parents expelled me and declared me not family until they realized their mistake. I'm Lisa, a 34-year-old woman who works as a project manager for a tech company in Seattle, Washington. I'm proud to say that I've established a nice life for myself, earning a relatively comfortable $135,000 annually. However, I wasn't handed it. It's the outcome of many hours of labor, careful planning, and hard work. Although I didn't have it easy as a child, my sister Amanda, who is 36 years old, certainly did. She is referred to as the family's golden girl, literally. Blonde and vivacious, she has always been the life of the party. She was treated like the next big thing by my parents and Mike. In all honesty, I believe that her blonde hair played a significant role. They've always had this strange notion that she was unique because she was blonde, which I know sounds absurd. Amanda's childhood was the epitome of perfection. Nothing ever required her to work for it. In addition to buying her a car and covering her college expenses, my parents also assisted her with the down payment on her first home. In the meantime, I took a different route. During my time in college, I worked part-time jobs, lived off of scholarships, and barely made ends meet by paying my bills and rent. I had no debt when I graduated, but I was exhausted. One of the few people who took notice of my diligence was Uncle Robert, my mother's brother. He started his real estate business from nothing and became a self-made millionaire. He has always been very giving to our family because he never had children of his own. But he's the type of guy who thinks you have to work for what you have. He therefore respected that I was fending for myself, even though he provided financial support for Amanda and my parents. The opulent lifestyle that Amanda and her spouse Brian lead is all smoke and mirrors. The amusing thing is that Amanda has a ton of carefully chosen vacation pictures on her Instagram. Private school functions, expensive dining out, Noah and my nephews. However, if you look behind the scenes, Uncle Robert owns all of the money. Neither she nor Brian have actual jobs. Amanda has never worked a day in her life, and Brian is technically in sales, but he's only average at best. She identifies as a full-time mother. Let's be honest, though. She has a nanny, my folks. Uncle Robert provides all of the funding for two. He pays their monthly expenses and medical bills, and they reside in a lovely retirement community in Arizona. They never really saved much for retirement because my mom was a teacher and my dad worked in factories for the majority of his life. However, they don't appear to feel bad about depending on Uncle Robert. They behave as though they were born with it. You're the only one in this family who understands what it's like to stand on your own 2 feet, Uncle Robert once told me. It felt like someone had finally recognized my struggle, so hearing that meant the world to me. Although I am aware that Amanda is upset with me for our relationship, the fact is that she couldn't live without him. To be honest, I don't have any expectations of my parents, and I'm fine with that. Watching them continuously indulge Amanda while pretending she's a saint for spending money that isn't even hers is just difficult. The thing that aggravates me the most is Amanda's superiority complex. She is always showing off her lifestyle and making disparaging remarks about how I work too much or lack the ability to enjoy life. In actuality, though, I'm content. Even though my life isn't as glamorous as hers, it's still mine and real. I sometimes question whether Amanda is even aware of her good fortune. She has never really had to struggle, in my opinion, and it shows in the way she despises me for being independent. She believes she is succeeding in life. However, all I see is someone who is totally reliant on other people. Being a part of this family can feel like a never-ending uphill battle this Christmas, even though I adore Uncle Robert. Let's say that things got out of hand. Uncle Robert, therefore, takes the family on a lavish vacation every Christmas. I'm not going to lie, we've been doing it for years. For a few days, it's pleasant. We stay in opulent hotels, enjoy delicious meals, and occasionally get along. To be honest, I believe Uncle Robert uses his extravagant behavior as a means of maintaining family unity, because we now all reside in different states. He chose an Aspen ski resort this year. Even though I'm not very good at skiing, I was still thrilled because, come on, Aspen is beautiful in December. Furthermore, I don't take lavish vacations every day. In retrospect, Uncle Robert's biggest error was assigning Amanda to handle all of the booking, but he has always trusted her to do so, presumably because she has plenty of free time and nothing else to do. I considered volunteering, but I didn't want to offend anyone. Even though she's only using Uncle Robert's money to book things, Amanda loves being the planner because it allows her to claim credit for everything. I reasoned that what could possibly go wrong? In any case, due to work, I booked my flight and arrived in Aspen a little later than everyone else. I had to finish up before I left because my company had a big project deadline. After hauling my suitcase through the snow, I reached the resort at about 4:00 in the afternoon. There were charming little cabins, snow-covered mountains, and sparkling lights strung up everywhere in this stunning photo. It resembled a scene from a Christmas film. Even more amazing was the main lodge. Vaulted ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains, and a massive stone fireplace. Families were enjoying hot chocolate while relaxing by the fire. Everyone appeared to be having a great time, and couples were arriving from the slopes. I expected a seamless, welcoming experience when I approached the front desk to check in, but instead, I got this perplexed look from the clerk. "I apologize, ma'am," she said, frantically typing on her computer. "Under your name, we don't have a reservation." I initially assumed that perhaps Amanda had simply forgotten to add me. Error to occur. However, Amanda remembered that she had done it intentionally. I could tell she was going to make a smug, passive-aggressive remark as soon as she entered the lobby. This was just another instance of Amanda's ability to use any circumstance as an opportunity to feel better than others. She arrived with the appearance of someone filming a commercial for a designer of winter coats. A huge smile that could shatter glass and flawless blonde hair. "Oh, Lisa," she said, seeming taken aback by my presence. "I only reserved rooms for the actual family, didn't I tell you? Not to mention Mom and Dad, Brian, Noah, and me. Never in my life have I been so stunned into silence. How do you even react to that kind of thing?" It was pretty obvious that she didn't think of me as belonging to the group when she said real family. Additionally, she showed no remorse at all. That was the icing on the cake. I looked at my parents in the hopes that they would intervene and speak, but they chose to avoid making eye contact. They were embarrassed, but not enough to take any concrete action. Amanda continued. "She never knows when to stop, of course. But you're very self-sufficient, aren't you?" She spoke in her phony, sweet voice, which she uses to mock you while feigning kindness. "You can probably find something close by." Then she chuckled, as if the entire situation were a joke. My face was starting to get hot, but I didn't want her to see me in a bad mood. Over the years, I've discovered that Amanda enjoys making others feel insignificant, so the best strategy to deal with her is to pretend she doesn't bother you. I inhaled deeply, made myself smile, and said, "Okay, have a great holiday." After that, I picked up my bag and left. I could feel Amanda's arrogant eyes on my back as I walked out of the lobby. I wasn't going to let her spoil my trip, even though she likely believed she had triumphed and humiliated me to some extent. To tell the truth, Amanda had previously pulled a similar prank. She has been the queen of exclusion for all time. either by inadvertently failing to invite me to family dinners or by purposefully keeping plans a secret until it's too late for me to attend. Reminding me that I don't belong in her eyes seems to give her a sick sense of satisfaction. Additionally, my parents have consistently allowed her to get away with it. They acted as though she was innocent. Furthermore, nothing has changed. If anything, as we've aged, they've become more enabling. Oh, they'll say, "That's just Amanda." Or perhaps she didn't mean it that way. As though there were no actual repercussions for what she did. This, however, felt different. This was not merely a casual get-together or dinner. It was Christmas, a time for the family. And she knew how painful it would be, so she purposefully left me out. When I finally stepped outside, I was furious. Despite the cold air hitting my face, I remained unfazed. Determined to find another place to stay, I took out my phone and began searching for hotels in the area. I had no intention of scuttling back to Amanda or my parents and pleading for a bed. I looked for a few minutes and discovered another upscale hotel 10 minutes away. A suite was available. Even though it was absurdly costly, I didn't mind. I refused to let Amanda's trivial antics spoil my Christmas. I dragged my suitcase through the snow while I waited outside and called for a cab. I began mentally reliving the entire scene as I stood there. The fact that Amanda actually said those words aloud astounded me. Actual family. Who even makes that claim? Knowing that my parents had most likely approved of it was the worst part. They did not prevent it, but they also did not plan it. More than anything, Amanda could have said or done that hurt. After throwing my suitcase in the back, I got into the taxi and gave the driver the new hotel's address. I began to feel a little better as we drove through Aspen's snowy streets. The brand new hotel was gorgeous. It may have even been better than the first one, to be honest. With floor-to-ceiling windows, a massive lobby Christmas tree, and a heated pool that resembled something from a travel magazine, it exuded a sleek, contemporary vibe. My suite was crazy. I already had plans to spend half the night in the soaking tub, the fireplace, and the large windows that overlooked the mountains. After I got settled, I began to consider how I didn't want to be by myself for Christmas. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy spending time alone, but I wanted to be with people I genuinely liked, and it was Christmas. That's when I thought of Sarah and Rachel, my two closest friends. Everyone needs friends like Sarah and Rachel, the kind who will drop everything for you in a pinch and who never fail to lift your spirits. This year, neither of them had any major plans for Christmas. Rachel had recently experienced a breakup and wasn't in the mood to celebrate, and Sarah's family was out of town. First, I gave Sarah a call. "Hello, what are your thoughts on spending Christmas in Aspen?" She chuckled. "Are you serious?" I was dead serious. I don't want to spend my vacation alone, and I have a suite at this fantastic hotel. Come spend some time together. Sarah made no hesitation at all. I'm on board. As soon as we can, Rachel and I will arrive. When they arrived later that day, I felt as though a burden had been removed. After exchanging hugs and catching up on everything, we started transforming the suite into our own private Christmas retreat. We ordered room service as our first action. Everything from burgers to fries to desserts, you name it. After that, we made the decision to use the hot tub, which was the most soothing thing I've ever done. Overlooking the mountains, the hotel featured a sizable outdoor pool area with a hot tub. I felt like I was on vacation for the first time that day, as the steam rose into the chilly night air. We began discussing the entire matter with Amanda while we were seated in the hot tub. Sarah was incredulous. In fact, she claimed that you were not a member of the true family. Rachel shook her head. She's always been a piece of work, but this is a new low. Honestly, you're better off not spending Christmas with her. They weren't wrong. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that being excluded was actually a blessing in disguise. I got to spend the holiday with people who genuinely cared about me rather than having to put up with Amanda's rudeness and my parents' partiality. We returned to the suite later that evening and turned on some Christmas tunes. We laughed until our sides ached, ate way too much chocolate, and danced around in our pajamas. We felt like children once more, enjoying a sleepover while putting all other concerns aside. I made the decision to share a couple Instagram stories at one point. My intention was not to be petty. Well, I may have been a bit petty, but I wanted Amanda to know that my vacation wasn't ruined by her small antics. I shared a picture of our ridiculous room service, spread a video of us dancing in the suite, and a video of us in the hot tub with the mountains in the background. As it turned out, Amanda was the first to see them. Through the screen, I could almost feel her rage. It's likely that she couldn't tolerate the notion that I was enjoying myself more than she was. Amanda must have gone crazy when she saw me content and unconcerned because she's the type of person who loves attention. We ordered breakfast in bed when we woke up late the following morning. We watched corny Christmas movies as we ate these enormous trays of waffles, eggs, bacon, and freshly squeezed orange juice that the hotel had brought. I had the most laid-back Christmas morning in a long time. "You know, this might be the best Christmas I've ever had," Sarah said to me at one point. Likewise, Rachel concurred. Just good friends and delicious food, no drama or stress. This ought to become a custom. Sincerely, I was beginning to experience the same emotions. The ironic thing is that I didn't think about Amanda and my family as much the more fun we had. Presumably, they were back at the original resort, going about their daily business as usual, ignoring all the cracks beneath the surface, and acting as though everything was fine. I didn't feel like I was missing out for once. We made the decision to get dressed up and head to one of the hotel's upscale restaurants that evening. The ambiance was warm and joyous, and the food was fantastic. We discussed a wide range of topics, including relationships, work, and our plans for the upcoming year. By the end of the evening, I felt completely different. I understood as we made our way back to the suite that Amanda's exclusion had in fact given me the greatest gift of all, the opportunity to celebrate Christmas with those who really mattered. Uncle Robert texted me the morning after we started our little Christmas retreat. He expressed interest in having breakfast with me at my hotel. I was both relieved and anxious, because I assumed he must have heard something about what transpired at the other lodge. I wasn't sure how Uncle Robert would respond to Amanda's predicament, but he doesn't play around with family. He was already seated at a corner table drinking coffee and appeared to be as composed as ever when I met him in the hotel restaurant. Uncle Robert is one of those individuals who effortlessly attracts attention. He is shrewd, unflappable, and always seems to be 10 steps ahead of the competition. After exchanging the customary greetings, he got right to the point. "Well, Lisa," he said, putting down his coffee cup. What took place at the lodge, I inhaled deeply before telling him everything. Amanda's smug little speech about making reservations for the real family started as soon as I got there and realized I didn't have a reservation. I tried not to come across as overly whiny, but I also didn't sugarcoat anything. As I talked, I simply stated the facts. Uncle Robert's expression changed, and I could see it. He appeared thoughtful at first, but as I continued to speak, his expression darkened. He was shaking his head in shock by the time I was done. He said, "I trusted Amanda to take care of everyone's booking." His tone was firm and low. "It's unbelievable that she left you out in that way, and your parents did nothing but watch it happen." I gave a nod, basically. Uncle Robert leaned back in his chair and let out a sigh. "It's unbelievable," he whispered. Our food was brought by the waiter. I had pancakes, Uncle Robert had toast and eggs, and we sat quietly for a minute while he took it all in. I could tell he was upset, but I wasn't sure what he would do. At last, he put down his fork and turned to face me. "Lisa, don't worry. I'll handle this." I wasn't going to argue, but I wasn't sure what he meant when he said, "Take care of this." Uncle Robert truly means it when he says he's going to do something, if that's one thing I've learned about him. He said he had some calls to make after breakfast and went to his room. Sarah and Rachel were already up and organizing our day when I returned to my suite. I had a feeling that things were going to get interesting, but I didn't tell them much about my talk with Uncle Robert, mainly because I didn't know what was going to happen yet. I received my response a few hours later. Uncle Robert called to inform me of his actions. And he didn't hold back, I tell you. He began by immediately terminating my parents' and Amanda's lodge reservations. He smirked and said, "They'll be packing up today." He continued after I could hear him over the phone. He also made the decision to completely cut them off financially. He was done paying for their lives. He said, "I've been more than generous. However, this is the final straw. They must develop some sense of responsibility." I was taken aback. I didn't anticipate Uncle Robert going nuclear like this, even though I knew he didn't put up with bullshit. I couldn't help but feel somewhat vindicated at the same time. After years of getting away with her entitled behavior, Amanda was finally being caught. My phone started exploding that afternoon. Amanda was the first. "Are you serious, Lisa?" When I picked up, she yelled, "Uncle Robert called it all off. We don't know where to take Noah when he starts crying." To be honest, I didn't feel sorry for her even though I could hear the panic in her voice. This is something she caused herself. "For once, why don't you try being self-sufficient?" Calmly, I said, and hung up. She called me back right away, but I didn't pick up. Sarah and Rachel, who were laughing at Amanda's foolishness, didn't either. "Is she real?" Scrolling through her phone, Rachel said. "She's most likely going crazy at the moment." Sarah added that she deserved it. This might be the last straw for her. Then it was my mother. Her voice was a mixture of desperation and rage. "You should speak with Uncle Robert," she advised Lisa. "You are aware of how crucial his assistance is to us. We are too old to make a fresh start." I wanted to chuckle. After ignoring my behavior and supporting Amanda's for years, my parents now wanted me to make things right. "Thank you, but no. I believe you should speak with Amanda," I said. All of this was brought on by her. I left before my mother finished speaking, but she sighed and said something about me being self-centered. I put my phone on silent and hung up. Uncle Robert came to check on me in my suite that night. He appeared composed, almost amused, as though he was taking pleasure in watching Amanda and my parents fumble. I don't believe they've ever had to deal with actual repercussions. "Oh," he said, "they will benefit from this." I felt like someone in my family truly had my back for the first time in years as we chatted and laughed for about an hour. Uncle Robert wasn't blind to Amanda's deceit. He was willing to do something about it. By the time he left, I felt lighter. The whole situation wasn't resolved, but at least for once, Amanda wasn't getting away with her usual antics. That night, my friends Sarah, Rachel, and I were still hanging out in the suite. We were lounging around eating snacks, watching Christmas movies, and scrolling through our phones. Honestly, it was probably the most relaxed I'd been all year. I posted a few more Instagram stories earlier in the day. Pictures of the fireplace in the suite our room service spread, and a clip of us playing charades and cracking up. Nothing too crazy, just us having a good time. And of course, Amanda was the first person to view every single one. Now I thought she'd just stew silently or send me another passive-aggressive text, but no. Amanda decided she needed to take things to a whole new level of desperation. At around 8:00 in the evening, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone else, so I figured it was room service or something. Sarah got up to answer it, and when she opened the door, there was Amanda. "Hey, girls," Amanda said, waltzing in like she was the guest of honor. She was dressed to the nines as usual. Perfect makeup, some kind of sparkly holiday outfit, and that fake, cheery smile plastered across her face. The three of us just stared at her like, what the hell is she doing here? Amanda didn't seem to notice the awkward silence. She plopped herself down on one of the chairs and started making herself comfortable like we'd invited her to the party. "Wow, Lisa, this suite is amazing. You guys look like you're having so much fun. Mind if I join?" I could feel my blood boiling. She had the nerve to act like nothing had happened, as if she hadn't purposely excluded me from the family trip and left me to fend for myself. And now, after Uncle Robert canceled her little holiday fantasy, she thought she could just show up and crash my night. I stood up and walked over to where she was sitting. "Amanda," I said, keeping my voice calm but firm. "You weren't invited. Leave." She looked up at me completely unfazed. "Oh, come on, Lisa," she said with a laugh. Don't be so uptight. It's Christmas. I crossed my arms and stared her down. It is Christmas, I said. And you tried to ruin mine. Get out for a second. I thought she might argue, but then she realized I wasn't messing around. Her face turned bright red, and she stood up, grabbing her purse. Fine, she snapped. But you don't have to be so rude about it. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her as soon as she was gone. The three of us just burst out laughing. It was so ridiculous that it didn't even feel real. Did that seriously just happen? Rachel said, shaking her head. What is wrong with her? She's delusional, Sarah said. She thinks the whole world revolves around her, and now that it doesn't, she doesn't know what to do. I couldn't argue with that. Being the center of attention and getting what she wants is the foundation of Amanda's entire identity. Her lack of self-awareness was demonstrated by the fact that in less than a day she had gone from excluding me to interrupting my plans. For a while, we made jokes about it and speculated about her next move. According to Sarah, she's most likely sitting in her car right now texting everyone she knows about how cruel you were, or looking for a different party to crash. To be honest, I didn't give a damn about Amanda's actions after she left, Rachel added. That she was no longer ruining my night was all that mattered to me. After preparing some popcorn and turning on the Christmas movie once more, we resumed our enjoyment. Naturally, though, Amanda was unable to ignore it. My phone began buzzing with texts about an hour later. The first one said, "After everything I've done for you, I can't believe how you treated me. How do you pay me back?" In fact, when I read that, I burst out laughing. She has done everything for me. Such as the guilt-tripping texts followed. Noah couldn't have been happier to see you this Christmas. He has spent the entire day inquiring about you, and now he is crying because he was unable to see his aunt. How could you harm him like this? Indeed, the traditional think of the kids strategy. When Amanda is in the wrong, she loves to use Noah as a shield. It seems as though she believes that if she brings up her child, I will magically forget about her actions. My favorite text was the last one. Lisa, you've changed a lot. I used to think you were a thoughtful and kind person, but now I realize how self-centered you are. Happy Christmas. I hope you're content. Sarah and Rachel were laughing uncontrollably when I showed them the text. She made a concerted effort to paint you as the bad guy. Oh, Rachel said. Unbelievable. Sarah stated that she is simply upset that you are no longer contributing to her drama. They were correct. I'd ignored Amanda's actions for years because I didn't want to upset anyone, but she had no idea how to respond now that I was advocating for myself. I didn't even bother answering her messages. Try to reason with her now, but there was no point. No matter what I said, Amanda would continue to believe whatever she wanted to believe. We ended up having a great time, and the remainder of the evening was drama-free. In retrospect, I believe Amanda's small antics increased my gratitude for my friends. They didn't think twice about calling Amanda out for her, and they supported me when my own family didn't. No sense. Not even a month had gone by when I went to bed, but I felt as though I had officially put an end to Amanda's drama both literally and figuratively after Christmas. My parents were in full-fledged crisis mode, Amanda. To be honest, it was a train wreck. What's the worst? They were solely responsible for it. First, let's talk about Amanda. Her whole phony life fell apart after Uncle Robert interrupted her. She and Brian had to sell their enormous home because they were no longer able to pay the mortgage. They looked for something comparable in a less expensive location, but clearly that was not possible. They consequently found themselves in this small rental home outside of their town. Amanda also made a huge deal out of it. She assured everyone who would listen that they would soon be back on their feet and that the move was only temporary. We all knew the truth, though. They were going to drown. Without Uncle Robert's assistance, she had nothing left to fall back on because she was already maxed out on her credit cards. Noah was forced to transfer to the local public school after being pulled from his upscale private school about which Amanda was always boasting. Naturally, Amanda made it seem as though she was a martyr for doing it. She said, "We just want Noah to have a more grounded experience." Yes, exactly. As everyone knows, it was because she was no longer able to pay the tuition. And she was completely silent on Instagram. This woman used to share daily updates about her ideal life on social media. High-end vacations, designer handbags, and exclusive school functions. Nothing now. The previous post, which was made prior to Christmas, had a generic caption that read, "I'm so grateful to be spending the holidays with my family." Living in a rental and trying to figure out how to pay the bills must make it difficult to maintain appearances. Uncle Robert, my parents weren't any better off. Cutting them off served as a surprise wake-up call. They were unable to maintain their luxurious retirement community in Arizona without his monthly allowance. They were not happy about having to move into a much smaller condo, let me tell you. My mother wrote me a lengthy, dramatic email about how difficult their situation had been. She laughed aloud as she described the sacrifices they had made for the family and how they never thought they would be in this situation at their age. "We only stayed in that retirement community to make room for you and Amanda to come visit." She even tried to guilt me by saying, as in really, they probably simply enjoyed the free golf and on-site spa. My dad even sent me an email at one point asking if I could persuade Uncle Robert to change his mind. "He's getting older, and I think he made this decision out of anger," he said. "The only person who can make sense to him is you." I didn't respond to that because I didn't even know how. These are the same individuals who allowed Amanda to keep me out of Christmas after all. They now wanted my assistance. Thank you, but no. Uncle Robert had already made up his mind, and I had no intention of interfering. My life, on the other hand, was entirely different from theirs. I was able to avoid the typical family drama for a change. I returned to Seattle after Christmas, resumed my job, and concentrated on the things that truly mattered. I received some wonderful news a week after returning home. I was elevated to the position of senior project manager. It also included a nice pay increase, which was ideal because I had overspent on that Aspen suite. I was also seeing good returns on my investments. Saving for the future has been my main priority, and it's paying off. Having that financial stability is crucial, particularly in light of Amanda's and my parents' current circumstances. Uncle Robert wrote me a handwritten note on my birthday a few weeks later. It was just a plain card with a very meaningful message for me. Nothing fancy. "I'm proud of you for your courage. The greatest gift you can give yourself is independence." As I read it, I started to cry a little. Although Uncle Robert has always been my strongest ally, seeing those words in print felt like confirmation of all the hard work I've put in. Amanda and my parents continued to send me texts and emails in the meantime. Amanda made an effort to play the victim by claiming she had no idea things would get this bad and asking me to speak with Uncle Robert on her behalf. My dad added a few passive-aggressive remarks about me abandoning the family, and my mom sent more guilt-trippy messages about how they were now having trouble making ends meet. Here's the thing, though, I didn't feel bad at all. I allowed myself to feel like the odd one out in my own family for years, as if my lack of ostentation and neediness made me somehow less significant than Amanda. However, I came to a realization this Christmas. My superpower is my independence. My parents may be having financial difficulties, but I don't have to bear that load, Amanda. They are currently coping with the repercussions of their decisions. Regarding myself, I'm doing well and have at last been liberated from the toxic family dynamics that once burdened me. I appreciate your patience if you are still reading this. The story's lesson, I suppose, is that sometimes the best course of action for both you and the person you are dealing with is to leave them.